Marc Racicot is with us right now, the former Republican governor of the state of Montana, but also a former U.S. Army JAG officer. Governor, welcome back to the program. I want to start with these comments that Joe was reporting on that are attributed to Admiral Bradley and the reaction on Capitol Hill, both from Democrats and Republicans. That classified briefing with the Admiral and senators on the Intelligence Committee, by the way, has just wrapped for the day. Heard the new comments from Senator Warner. From your experience, what do you make of all of this about the so-called second strike and how it was handled?
Well, first of all, Colonel, the confinement of this just to the first strike, which is in essence what we're talking about, the first strike in September. This is a much broader issue than what it is being debated as presently. In other words, it's all of these attacks on these boats from the beginning until now, 21 different vessels and 83 different lives that were involved in all of those efforts. For there to be international aggression, like the kind that we're talking about, there has to be an armed conflict. And an armed conflict is defined by law as one between two states or countries. So we know there was, at least that's what we have been led to believe, there's no other country other than the United States. They also have to be facing hostilities. So that means that the Admiral had to be able to establish that, in fact, there were hostilities against the United States on behalf of another state or country. There's no proof of that. As a matter of fact, we don't have any proof of any of those vessels' cargoes, nor do we, at the public at least, have any proof about whether or not there were any enemy combatants there. We only know that because they're not representing a country, as far as we know. So all that we know is that we have civilians. If they're not enemy combatants, they're civilians. So this is a horrific set of circumstances. It's going to take a significant amount of time to unfold and produce all of the facts. And the notion that somehow we just focus on the first and second strikes with the first attack is something that I think narrows it way beyond where it's ultimately going to end up, because the scope of this thing is over at least 2 or 2.5 months. It involves 21 different vessels. It involves 83 different people. There's no hostilities revealed on behalf of those who were on those boats. They were disabled. They couldn't respond. And there has to be an ability to, the only aggressor here was the United States of America. So these are still very, very serious issues. Only the tip of the iceberg has been discussed in front of Congress today.
I'm glad you brought it in that context and the way you're presenting it, because I think sometimes when people, and this was the case yesterday when the president was talking about it, but just in general, even some of the conversations we've had on the show today, it's like, well, if you're bringing up or asking questions about this, somehow you're opposed to, it's an anti-Trump kind of approach, or you're opposed to the president's approach here, and you're on the side of the narco traffickers or what have you. But the way you've laid it out proves to us and lays out to us that it's far more than that. So let's say, for example, that the president wanted to make the case to the Congress that the state in question was Venezuela. You said that there had to be 2 states in armed conflict, and you'd be facing hostilities. What type of information would we need to see? What would need to be presented if he was going to make a case against the country, the nation state of Venezuela?
Well, there would have to be representations and evidence that Venezuela was involved as a state, as a nation. Secondly, there would have to be soldiers who would then be classified as enemy combatants if they were representing Venezuela. Thirdly, there would have to be attacks. There would have to be hostilities. There's no evidence that anybody on any of these boats has been involved in hostilities against the United States. So we don't know if there's any evidence of drugs on those boats. We have no idea. And even if there are, that doesn't give the United States the authority and the discretion to simply proceed outside the boundaries of the law of war and international treaties that we're a part of, like the Geneva Convention. So at the end of the day, for those 6 members of Congress to advise their soldiers that they better be careful, because the duty here, Kamal, is on each individual soldier. Each individual soldier, I saw Senator Kelly make the comment that in fact, that armed forces can refuse illegal orders. The fact is that under the law, they must refuse an illegal order. So each member that's involved in the chain of command has to make a judgment about whether or not this is a legal order. And they're not being fired upon. There's no indication that there's any hostilities. I know that they like to term it a war on drugs, but that's just simply not what the law says. And they can't make it up as it goes. And this is something vastly more serious with 83 lives. What if there's no evidence of drugs on those boats? And they've all been vaporized with munitions that were extraordinarily large and devastating.
So Marc Racicot is the former, not only governor of a state, but also former JAG officer. Thank you, Governor.